Good morning and welcome. My name is Jules Dunham Howie, and I am the co-chair of the CRA Baltimore Initiative. And we are excited to be with you this morning. Our topic is sharing with you about the CRA Baltimore strategy and how we have developed this initiative, which is working to build a successful citywide bank accountability initiative. So, how have we done this and what have we done? Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do this session. First, you'll get an opportunity to meet the CRA Baltimore team. Then you'll get to hear about the context and how this is part of a larger national initiative. Then we'll talk about CRA Baltimore and its way and the way that it is working to address Baltimore's wealth gap. Then we'll look at the CRA Baltimore initiative focus in detail and explain to you what we're trying to do and what are the critical areas that we're focused on. And we will round out with talking about the initiative structure. There have been a lot of people who say, how are you doing that? What have you done? How can I do it in my city? Well, just hold on because we're going to tell you. And then lastly, we'll open it up for questions and answers from the audience. So, first thing first, who's here? Wanda?
Okay. Good morning. Welcome to CRA Baltimore. I am the co-chair with Jules Dunham Howie. I'm the executive director of the Upton Planning Committee, which is an umbrella community association that's responsible for 6 associations under it and the commercial district, Pennsylvania Avenue, Main Street. We represent 10,000 residents and 150 businesses. Watching?
Yes, good morning. Good morning. My name is Watchen Bruce, and I'm the president CEO of Baltimore Community Lending. We are a community development financial institution, a mission-based lender, and we provide small business lending and affordable housing lending. Thank you, and we look forward to sharing our thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Christian, and I'm the Executive Director of the Midway CDC, and we're focused on redevelopment efforts in East Baltimore, Midway, and the surrounding communities. Prior to joining the organization, I had the privilege of serving my community for many years, both in community organizing space and working within city government. So I'm really excited to be here and join you all today.
Lawrence?
Good morning, everyone. I am Lawrence Campbell. I'm the chair of the board of the WBC Community Development Corporation. Prior to that, I spent 15 years as the president of the WBC Community Development Corporation. We have been in the Forest Park communities. I say communities because there are 6 communities which have the name Forest Park associated with them. We've now formed an alliance called the Forest Park Alliance. We have been in the market for doing scatter site development as well as senior housing development. And one of the keystones is our Wayland Village Senior Apartment Complex, which is located on Garrison Boulevard. We are working with the various neighborhood associations to help them keep their programs going. And also we're working to interact with the larger Forest Park and Northwest District neighborhoods.
Thank you. Deborah?
Good morning. I'm Deborah Keller Green. I am the chairperson of Board of Directors for the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce. And the focus of the Chamber of Commerce is to provide support and leadership to Black-owned businesses in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard, Harford, and Anne Arundel counties in collaboration with those counties. I am also a business owner in Baltimore, Keller Professional Services consulting firm. I was raised and educated in Baltimore, and I'm really honored to be part of the CRA Baltimore leadership team. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Guerrier?
Yes, Dr. Al Guri. I'm a faculty member at the University of Baltimore. I am the director of the Nonprofit Management Social Entrepreneurship Program, and I'm a board member of the Upton Westside. Well,
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Muhammad was not able to attend this morning. Next is Al Pena.
Good morning, everybody. Al Pena. I'm the chair of the Florida Minority Community Reinvestment Coalition, an economic civil rights organization, and also co-founder of the National Minority Community Reinvestment Cooperative, an informal group of Black and Latino groups around the country coming together to address CRA.
Thank you.
All right. So, Al, if you tell us a little bit about the context, how this is a part of a national initiative.
You got it. Thank you, Jules. What's ironic, everybody on the audience and anybody who's listening, whether it's this audience, Facebook, or some social media platforms that we're on, just ask yourself, do you even know what CRA is? And most Black and Latinos, 9 out of 10 and 10 out of 10 will say no, yet CRA impacts 100% of our housing and small business. It involves literally trillions of dollars that banks are mandated by federal law, which is absolutely, which by the way is changing as we speak. The laws are changing, and hopefully they will become more racially relevant. But the fact of the matter that CRA has been centralized to Washington, D.C. and bank headquarters, and that's why CRA has been shown to be really ineffective. And some folks may say, well, there's a lot of things going on, but just point to one thing, the recent pandemic. The pandemic exposed a major social, racial, economic fault line. Blacks and Latinos have suffered way more than any other group. And that shows that our safety net, our economic safety net, is not effective. And in essence, CRA is not effective as it looks and as the way it's being built out now. And that's truly because most Black and Latinos, a few voices speak for all of us. And we've come together to say, no, I don't speak for you in Kansas City. I don't speak for you in Los Angeles. I don't speak for you in Dallas. I don't speak for you in Chicago. You speak for yourself, but we certainly will fight for your ability and right to speak for yourselves as it relates to community reinvestment, the billions of dollars coming through banks into the streets and into the communities that have not been effective for Blacks and Latinos. So a bunch of us got together, Black and Latino leaders, and Baltimore was the linchpin of saying, well, we need to put together actually decentralized CRA mechanisms where Blacks and Latinos, or Blacks or Latinos, but a concentrated racial focus to bring bank accountability in each of your cities. This is the only way we're going to get any kind of impact and change the lack of impact that CRA has had. And again, knowing you just have to, Google CRA Community Reinvestment Act, and you'll soon learn this impacts every facet of housing and small business and capital. So we decided again to come together, and these great leaders on the session that you see today, they were the launch, pin. They were the launch city for the country, and we plan to bring together and teach and do more sessions like this and teach each of you in their various cities how can you put together a Black Latino, a racially relevant bank accountability system council in your city. And I'm happy to be part. Like I said, I don't speak for Baltimore, but I absolutely will fight for them. So we welcome you, and I look forward to working with everybody. Thank you. And this slide shows that we're, the cities we're focusing. We want to build up. If we can build up 50 cities of these councils that are self-sufficient, that speak for themselves. There isn't a national group that speaks for you. There isn't somebody in DC that speaks for you. Your elected official doesn't speak for you. The bank doesn't speak for you. You speak for yourself in these 50 cities. I guarantee you, if we can build 50 of these mechanisms, CRA, bank accountability councils in 50 cities, it will change for our communities of color overnight. Thank you, Jules.
All right. Before we get into the details and specifics of the program itself, the CRA initiative, talk a little bit, or just to give you a little context about the city of Baltimore. We'll run through some demographic and neighborhood information as it relates to Baltimore City specifically. Baltimore is a city that is 63% Black. It's a predominantly Black community in the city of Baltimore. Has a very small Latino population. Roughly about 4.5% of the population of Baltimore is Latino, but it is a predominantly Black city. However, the income of Blacks in the city of Baltimore is half that of their white counterparts. The unemployment rate of Blacks in the city of Baltimore is 3 times that of their white counterparts, and the net worth, about a third of households of color in the city of Baltimore have a zero, a negative net worth. Oftentimes when we talk about banking, we talk about lack of access to capital in communities of color throughout the country. We talk about banking deserts. The results of that is what we see here in the demographics as it relates to the citizens of Baltimore. A direct correlation between the insufficient income that we see among the predominantly Black community of Baltimore results in a liquid asset poverty rate of Black residents in the city of Baltimore at 67% compared to 32% of their white counterparts. We're talking about a city that is predominantly Black. However, the communities of color within the city of Baltimore are significantly disadvantaged and underinvested. Those investments are a direct result of the lack of contribution of the banking industry that is required by law under the CRA regulations. Here, data provided by the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative show that racial economic inequality in the city of Baltimore is very similar to what we see in urban centers across the country. Blacks in Baltimore have a median income of that 54% of whites, while nationally Blacks have a median income of 60% of whites. Just that indication that Blacks in Baltimore are actually doing worse off than Blacks around the country. And the same is also true for Latino population, small Latino population in Baltimore, doing worse off than Latinos nationally in comparison to their white counterparts. Oftentimes when we talk about the neglect of neighborhoods, we talk about historical and racial segregation and discrimination that's taken place by the banking industry. And Baltimore is no different. Obviously, redlining has had a historical impact on the city of Baltimore. Even though redlining is no longer legal at a banking or federal level, neighborhoods that were once perceived to be redlined, 3/4 of them today are still considered low-income neighborhoods. At one time, the city of Baltimore actually served as a model city for the rest of the country as it relates to discriminatory housing practices in terms of contract sales for minority residents, which still has a lingering impact in today's segregation and economic conditions of the Baltimore neighborhoods that we're talking about here. Residents in the city of Baltimore, Black residents, make up 63% of the population, as we spoke of before, but African Americans are worse off in nearly almost every demographic and social economic statistics that we can cover. Whites, on the other hand, constitute only 28% of the population in Baltimore, but do far better across national statistics, according to whites nationally in the racial wealth gap divide. Here we see, and I'm a little slapped. So here we see a time perspective from 1983 to 2016. And between 1983 and 2016, median Black families saw their wealth drop by more than half, while white counterparts saw an increase in wealth, increase of 33% over the same time period. So in the city of Baltimore, over the last 30 years, we saw African Americans lose in terms of the wealth divide, while their white counterparts gained in the city of Baltimore. Home ownership gap in the city of Baltimore for Blacks rates about 42%, which is significantly that below the national average of home ownership for Blacks, while at the same time, their white counterparts have a home ownership rate of 60%. Within those home ownership rates, we still see a great dispersion in terms of median home values for those of African Americans and Black residents of Baltimore compared to their white counterparts. Like we said before, there's a small Latino population in the city of Baltimore, roughly about 4.5%. But what we see is a similar track record or pattern in the socioeconomic statistics as it relates to the Latino residents in the city of Baltimore. Again, the liquidity standpoint, the liquid wealth perspective of Black residents, which corresponds directly to the lack of income, the lack of access to capital, is apparent in almost every category we see for African Americans throughout the city of Baltimore, a city that is predominantly Black, a city that has a history of discriminatory lending practices, a city that is wrought as a banking desert in its two predominantly Black communities on East Baltimore and West Baltimore. 17 out of the 19 CSA community statistical areas that we have in the city of Baltimore have no bank representation per 1,000 residents. These are communities of color that have been neglected by the Banking Institute, which serves as the basis for what the CRA initiative is pushing for. Jules?
Thank you. And thank you, Al. And it's sobering. And we start with that picture because all cities have to do that initial analysis to figure out what's going on and where are the disparities and the issues. And what we see, as Al indicated, is that these issues have been going on for decades. And basically, CRA localized initiatives are saying enough is enough. We absolutely can and should be doing better as a people and better within our communities in terms of being able to access resources and be able to live the lives that we want to see ourselves live, which are hopefully prosperous and healthy. So what is this initiative about? Well, it's predicated on CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act. And basically, CRA says that banks have to set aside funds for greater investment for Black and Latinos. But many of them don't. And what they do is they obfuscate the funding that they give by couching it in these very large national initiatives, saying they're going to give $500 billion over 5 years nationally. But when you come and look at that at the local level, out of that $500 billion, a market might be happy to get a couple million. And so a local market. And so what we said with CRA Baltimore is we have to be able to understand how the dollars are flowing into our local community. So what is CRA Baltimore? We are a coalition working to localize CRA investments and hold banks accountable for their CRA work in Baltimore City. CRA Baltimore is a watchdog group committed to ensuring that Baltimore City and all Black and Latino communities receive a fair share of CRA investments from the top banks in the region. And that's all we're asking for, is a fair share. We're not asking for a handout or hand up. We're asking them to invest what they should invest in our communities. So what we've done is we have put together this initiative that says that we are working to get the top 11 major banks within the Baltimore region to invest, that actually have $85 billion in deposits, to make specific investments targeted towards Baltimore City. And this is our ask. We want the top banks in Baltimore City to invest $30 billion in Baltimore City over the next 5 years in these 4 critical areas. And our presentation is going to take you through each one of these areas and explain what they are and why they are so important for Baltimore. So we're seeking $15 billion in investment over 5 years for Black and Latino small business. We're seeking $4.25 billion in investment over 5 years for increasing Black and Latino home ownership. We're seeking $10 billion over 5 years for Black and Latino housing development. And we're asking for $75 million over 5 years to build the capacity for Black and Latino-led organizations. So let's talk about these 4 areas and understand why they are important for Baltimore City. In all of these areas, we believe that investment in all 4 of these areas will actually help us address what Al talked about, which was us being able to, we lost the slides, team, help us. Us being able to close the racial wealth gap within Baltimore City. And that's really what this initiative is. And we believe that there's probably a racial wealth gap in all of the major cities across the United States, and that CRA should be a way to help address that. And we think by investing in these 4 pillars that we will see the racial wealth gap of Baltimore City be closed. All right, so team, let's take it away. Let's talk about these areas. Pillar 1, watching? Is that right? No, pillar 1. Who's that?
That's Deborah.
Deborah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jules and Al Goria. Al did a fantastic job of giving us some overall statistics. So can we go to the first slide, Jules? All right. So I'm not going to, Al did a wonderful job of giving us the overall statistics for Baltimore City's population. I would like to kind of highlight some very important statistics regarding Black and Latino businesses in Baltimore. So Baltimore City is home to approximately 50,000 businesses, about half of which are owned by people of color. Of Baltimore's 500 businesses, approximately 39,000 are sole proprietors, making up a broad range of types of businesses. More than 60% of Baltimore sole proprietors are people of color. So among Baltimore's sole proprietors, 61% are owned by people of color, 56% are owned by women, and while business owners represent 56%, only 12% of revenues among Baltimore's businesses. So we only own 12% of the revenue, even though we make up 61% of the businesses. So according to FDIC data, businesses in communities of color in East and West Baltimore receive about 8% of the dollars that amount to loans to businesses, as compared to wealthier sections of central Baltimore. So, based on this information, we know that Black and Latino businesses play an important role in improving local economies and uplifting our communities. Therefore, access to capital is essential. Yet, Black and Latino businesses receive less financing, and we often pay higher rates for those financing. So according to a study done by H&R Block and the New York Stock Exchange in February of 2021, this year reflects that 37.9% of Black business owners say that they are discouraged from applying for loans. Only 18% of Black business owners report assistance from loan officers in completing loan applications. 44% of Black business owners use their own cash to support their venues. So as we can see by this, in order to properly address the wealth gap in Baltimore, Black businesses must grow beyond the sole proprietorship and create jobs in our communities that pay a living wage. So in order to do that, we need to have that access to capital. So the CRA and the investments into Baltimore's Black and Latino small businesses are important. So what we see here are the various components that we believe will help to close that wealth gap among small Black and Latino business owners by direct loans to Black and Latino businesses, direct loan to those nonprofits that are led by Black and Latino businesses and those that support us, equity funding investments into Black and Latino businesses. I mean, that's essential that we have equity investments. We need the technical assistance and grants through nonprofits, and specifically the CDFI investment loans are our top priority. That's in the center of it all. We need real supplier diversity, and we need loan investments in our low and moderate income communities. Only then will we actually be able to realize the wealth gap in the Black and Latino business communities.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. And so now let's talk a little bit about Pillar 2, increasing Black and Latino home ownership. All right.
Good afternoon, or good morning, still morning. But in removing ourselves away from this issue of how do we get here? For me, when I looked at this CRA thing, it looks like us as persons of color that we've been, and many of us are already aware, that we have been disparagingly put into a box that somebody else created and not given the keys to how to get out. But the CRA investments by the banks over the next 5 years of $4.5 million out of these top 11 banks, specifically in the housing, will help us to not only open the box, but get out of the box and start building in our own communities. There are approximately the mortgage rates that have been provided to persons of color in Baltimore is more than twice, is denied twice that of whites. And specifically for Hispanics, it's like 19%. And this kind of treatment is part of the problem that we're trying to correct as we as the committee of the CRA committee here in Baltimore are looking at it. So as it applies to us in Baltimore, it also applies across the United States. We found that in the fall of 2018, there was an analysis of leading disparity in the Baltimore Business Journal that examined the denial rates of the largest lenders in the Baltimore region. These are these big banks. And the combined market share of 80% is denied to African-American mortgage loaners at 1.5 times the rate of non-Hispanic white applicants. So what we're seeing is a pattern that has been put in place to keep persons of color in the box. So we want to get out of the box. Now, when we look at another area, the subprime loans ranging from 20 to 40% of the loans are in Baltimore City, also overlap with African-American concentrations. So these are subprime loans on which they end up charging you extra money. So you can see that there's a disparity that's going on for not only here, but goes without saying that if you do those things in loans, what's the corollary to backing up that? And that's the appraisals. The appraisals in Baltimore City are based upon the bias of Black folks and brown folks not being able to afford the properties. Homes in the $150,000 to $175,000 range are critical for making sure that we make sure the workforce are substantiated, is another word, substantially given foundational support. Buyers are being challenged because of these low appraisals. When we were building houses, affordable housing here in West Baltimore, we had to argue with the appraisers because the appraisers would give us comps that were based upon some area that was not even in West Baltimore. And so what we had to do was we had to argue to be able to get appropriate comps that would, so we could sell the houses to our potential buyers at the proper rate. As a nonprofit, what we found was when we were building affordable housing, this practice was not just here in West Baltimore, but it was precipitated all throughout Baltimore. And part of the reason why I'm working with the CRA committee is that because of having experienced this issue, it just doesn't sit well with me. But let me get back to my presentation. There is a lending desert in Baltimore that's targeted for value building. In other words, clustered rehabilitation for normalized appraisals, and Black and brown developers should be supported. As a developer, and I've talked with many other developers, we run into this same appraisal thing. We run into this thing where we're not being given the appropriate recognition, is a better way to say it. CRA will help us to get not only the recognition, but to be able to put money and remove this bias that's in place, because we're now speaking with something that says with a one voice, we want this $4.5 million for home ownership for Black and Latino people to be given to us. It doesn't say it's a whole lot of money, because when you look at the division of it, it only comes out to a little less than $3 million per bank. So what we need to do is to at least get that money in place and then build on that, because the CRA was put in place so that this thing would happen. Now, what we see here are the tenets of this. The focus for this is the direct loans to Black and Latino home buyers by the banks. That's what this effort is about, for at least in this context. Part of this, then, if we go to the top, we see loans and equity to Black and Latino affordable housing developers. There are many developers and small contractors who want to expand their portfolio, but you get denials on the loan applications. So we got to figure out and say to the banks, we need you to improve this record. The community development loans and investments, we want you to improve that. We need the financial institutions and literacy grants. The nonprofits as well as developers, they need some training. One of the great things about working with Baltimore Community Lending is that they have classes and they have training to help contractors and nonprofits to be able to understand how to put your portfolio together, how to put your pro forma together. And so those are the things that are foundational to the developers and nonprofits. We need from the banks to understand to put more money out there in assistance grants. Okay, it's nice to be able to get the loan, but sometimes you just, in order to do the operational part of the work, you need technical assistance grants to be able to pay staff. Now, loan investments and For our Section 8 housing, people sort of want to push that off to the side. But you can't push that off to the side, not in the Black and brown communities, because our people need those loans. You need to be able to have that investment. We need to have housing to take care of all of our people, and all of our people include those persons who are below the median income. The last one is loans and investments in the Black and Latino low to moderate income communities. For me, that's tied in with the Section 8 housing. So those things separated out. We put these 6 things around the direct loans, because these 6 things are key to holding this CRA principle for Latino home ownership in place. Thank you.
All right, and so let's look at our next pillar, Pillar 3, Black and Latino housing development.
All right, if you can go to that slide, please. So closing the wealth gap, I think that concept of equity is sometimes easier to grasp in everyday conversation when we're talking about increasing Black and Latino home ownership or making investments in small business. But the components of this slide are a good example of CRA in action from a development standpoint. But keep in mind that many, if not most, Black and Latino housing developers are small businesses, and greater access to capital, especially for affordable housing development, means greater opportunities for success for everyone in that space. It's important for the banking community also to understand the value that Black and Latino affordable housing developers bring to the table and the value add to the bank's bottom line. Our success attracts other developers, experienced developers, to the communities that are quite often overlooked. But we need fair and consistent funding and capital to do more of this meaningful work. CRA Baltimore's main focus is economic justice, making CRA work in the Black and Latino community. Lender funds with a specific focus on Black and Latino affordable housing developers, that debt and equity capital into our housing lender funds, that serves to level the playing field for us. Each component of this honeycomb represents sources of funds that fuel our development projects. Lender funds, increasing the pool of capital, means more projects on the street. Capacity grants, this direct operational support, allows CDCs to take on more projects. Technical assistant grants to builders, to the Builders Collective, that strengthens the core operators in that space and ensures use of best practices. It also supports the collaboration efforts of our Black and brown developers. Sharing knowledge is key to the success and enables us to make a greater impact. Loans to increase rental housing development. With fair rates and favorable terms, we can continue to address the shortage of affordable housing. Black and Latino-led and focused nonprofit developers are intentional in undoing decades of neglect. And loans and investments into community master plans, those things increases our ability to create and implement master plans that will put us on the path to getting whole block outcomes. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I think Dr. Gurrier had mentioned the fact that redlining, we're still suffering the effects of redlining today. He mentioned that 3/4 of our communities are still undervalued. And I think if you look at, again, the previous slide kind of told you these are the components that we need to make a big difference in our communities. And think about it. This is the second highest funded pillar in our initiative. So what do we do when the banks say, okay, here's the money, now what? So the Developers Collective is critical. It's a critical component because this is where the rubber meets the road. We need to have shovel-ready projects in the pipeline to demonstrate that we can get the job done. And our boots on the ground, those are Black and Latino-led and focused builders who have been in the trenches finally getting the needed capital to continue the work.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Kathy. And so we have our last pillar, Pillar 4, which is building capacity for Black and Latino organizations. Watch it.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you all. Pillar 4 talks about building capacity for Black and Latino organizations. And building capacity is really institutional capacity building we are talking about. So, but first we want to define what is capacity building. Capacity building is just not about building capacity for a nonprofit today. It is about nonprofits' ability to to deliver its mission effectively and efficiently, and also not just today, but also in the future. Capacity building is an investment in an effectiveness and future sustainability of a nonprofit. If the organization is effective and sustain itself, it provides better services to its constituents and borrowers in the community. Distinct capacity building projects, such as identifying a communication strategy, also improving volunteers recruitment, ensuring thoughtfulness in our leadership succession plans, and also updating a nonprofit technology, which is the infrastructure of that organization, but most importantly, improving how it measures outcomes and outputs, and of course, the impacts, and all building the capacity of the charitable nonprofit to effectively deliver on its mission statement. When capacity building is successful, it strengthens a nonprofit ability to fulfill its obligation and mission over time, thereby enhancing the nonprofit's ability to have positive impact on the lives of our communities. According to the National Council of Nonprofits, it says that capacity building is whatever is needed to bring a nonprofit to the next level of its operational, programmatic, financial, or organizational maturity. So it may be effective and efficient and advances the mission in the future. Capacity building is not a one-time effort to improve short-term effectiveness, but a continuous improvement of strategy towards creation of sustainability and effective organizations. Nonprofits serving communities of color have an especially difficult time accessing needed resources. Nonprofits serving communities of colors often operate in underserved and under-resourced communities, which lack many of the basic infrastructure elements like meeting spaces, also may lack many of the basic infrastructure resources that's needed to scale up operations. So furthermore, these the donor communities need to pay special attention to communities of colors because it is good investment. And also the public and private foundations of the various banks that invest in our community need to look at investing in nonprofits as an investment in themselves because they are the borrowers and customers of these banks. This is intensified also by limited infrastructure, an example like we talk about marketing and communication, and also fundraising, as well as to carry out other functions internally that tend to attract funding, such as the evaluation and monitoring evaluation functions. You need staff, operational staff, to perform these functions. So without needed investment, it's difficult to have the in-house capacity. So finally, many of these nonprofits serving community of colors are being regularly overlooked by private foundations or banks and public foundations who do not prioritize social justice and equity, and who do not fund social justice initiatives at a meaningful level. So what we are saying is CRA Baltimore stands with others for equity and justice, and in denouncing racism, intolerance, and exclusion, yet taking a stand is not enough. We believe that embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion is a way to intentionally make space for positive outcomes to flourish, whether indirectly or directly, in a nonprofit capacity building. Just like a small business, nonprofit organizations needs that infrastructure building internally to be able to serve its constituents. The days of receiving pennies on a dollar for investment in grassroots capacity building and technical assistance must come to an end. There must be investments in building infrastructure of brown and Black nonprofits in Baltimore. This is the only way we will be able to compete and also serve the greater population. So one of the recommendations for strengthening assistance or capacity building is based on findings and research from the Learning for Change Research Project, with over 1,000 nonprofits, funders, and capacity building providers in the Chicago area. They developed 4 recommendations on ways nonprofit can collectively leverage capacity building resources to create a stronger ecosystem of nonprofits. Many of these recommendations are relevant in the city of Baltimore. So capacity building, one of those is to focus on equity, prioritize investments in under-resourced communities and the organization that serve them, as they are at profound systemic disadvantage as they try to address the severe social problems in the community. 2, take a developmental approach. Prioritize investment that help organizations get and stay on the sustainable development path. In order to be sustainable, it must be continuous. And of course, with that, the organization will be able to scale up operation to serve in a better capacity and be competitive to make sure that our community are getting the best of service from us. 3, we want to invest in a system navigating function. Make available human resources complemented by technology that can provide real-time and customized support for our organizations as they seek to assess and address capacity building needs. And 4, support nonprofit connectivity. Promote capacity building efforts that will build connection between and among nonprofit organizations, their leadership, and social sector peers, both as part of a process and as an outcome. Definitely, we need partnership and linkages amongst ourselves. But because we are not generating revenues sufficient enough to operate, we need those assistance from our partners, which are the financial institution. It shouldn't be because of Community Reinvestment Act, but it is good business investment to invest in the infrastructure of your borrowers who will help you with your bottom lines. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Watson. And we appreciate you listening to our process. And as you can see, it's very thorough because we had to take each one of those pillars, and those pillars were developed based on the reality within Baltimore City. And we had to do the research. And so this morning we've shared with you a little bit of the research that has informed the ask for these 4 pillars within Baltimore City. But we know that some of you are sitting there going, all right, that's all fine and good, but how do I do this in my city? How do I get a CRA initiative in in Tallahassee, or how do I do it in Dallas? And so that's what we're going to focus on now. And we're looking forward to getting your questions shortly. So how have we structured this CRA Baltimore initiative, and how have we gotten this far? So let's talk a little bit about it. Wanda, why don't you tell them how we put together the structure?
Okay, well, first of all, let me put some things in context. I think I met Al Pina over 10 years ago when he visited Baltimore, and I took him on a drive in Upton, a community that's been underserved for years in West Baltimore. And what people saw as a negative, I always saw as an opportunity, and he saw the same thing. You've heard a lot of information about the challenges of Black and Brown communities in development and making their communities stronger. And in the 30 years that I've been doing this work, I've had the opportunity to meet people on this team and throughout the city. So when we started to talk with Al about CRA Baltimore, and he hooked up with Jules, Dunham, Howie, okay, it was a train that we couldn't stop. But doing this work over 30 years, we knew that I knew that we needed respected community leaders throughout the city. We needed that team to be diverse. We couldn't cherry pick. We needed to represent everybody in the Baltimore area. We needed like-minded people that knew what we were going through, the challenges we were going through, and how we needed help. We needed a group of people that did not, single focused on their area. There's no I in our team. And we needed people that had expertise, like Dr. Guerrier, in the academics as well as the research, to break this thing down and help us understand the ask. Okay, so that's how we put our team together. I think we're real tight. When one person has to circle off, someone else can come and fill in. And I'm really proud to be a part of this CRA team in Baltimore. And I hope that our example replicates throughout the country and brings to fruition those 50 CRA teams throughout the country. Thanks, Jules.
Thank you, Wanda. And, this is just the leadership. Behind us, though, are hundreds of individuals that are working on the ground, and they're the network and the coalition. And so we are just the ones that are pulling together and the voices at the top. But there are a whole lot of other organizations that will be directly benefited from the work that we are doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that research component. Al?
So sure. And Wanda started to talk about the staging process as we move through this initiative. And one of the things that we needed to accomplish initially was first to understand who are the players in our market, what institutions are available, what institutions are in our market, the market share that those individual institutions hold, the capacity, the lending history, and those type of components that come into play as it relates to providing access to capital to the community. What you see on your screen is just a snapshot of HMDA data that's available in a type of information that is publicly available for you to work through as you start to assess the institutions and the lending capacity of those institutions in the market, who they're serving and how they're serving. However, one of the challenges that we have when we're dealing with understanding CRA is that data is oftentimes aggregated. That doesn't tell us exactly what institutions are doing within our community. For example, on the screen, what you see is a snapshot of HMDA data that's available for an institution, but as it relates to an MSA. Now, an MSA is a collection of communities, neighborhoods, even cities that make up, for census purposes, a larger metropolitan statistical area.
However, in the Baltimore area, when we talk about the MSA, we're talking about an area that is much larger than the Black and brown communities that we talk about within the city of Baltimore. So as we move forward in our process, understanding that the data we need to discuss, look at, analyze is specific data as it relates to those specific communities that the CRA initiative is focused on. So understanding data as it relates to the greater metropolitan area, and specifically as it relates to the specific communities that the CRA initiative is focused on, is a big component. A second component of that is you look at HMDA data. That information is only available as it relates to mortgage loans from a HMDA perspective or a HMDA regulation. We do not have specific detailed information as it relates to small business loans, and we're limited outside of SBA and some other small data points that we get for small business lending. However, one of those components is currently in the process of being changed as it relates to 1071 of the Dodd-Frank Act, in terms of in the future going forward, data that will be collected on small business loans, which will assist initiatives such as the CRA initiative to understanding loans that are made by race, by gender, by minorities, and by location, that would assist the CRA initiative in terms of holding banks accountable for access to capital and lending in the communities that we look at. So a big part of understanding or moving forward with your CRA initiative is understanding the banks and the institutions in the market, the lending capacity that they have, the asset size, and the business that they're currently doing as we move forward. Now, when we devised the CRA initiative and we came up with the lending capacity or the need for the Black and brown community, the number that you focus on is the $30 billion. However, as we talked about in this presentation, that $30 billion is broken down into 4 different pillars. Now, each of those pillars makes up a different component of the $30 billion. Of the $30 billion, about half is allocated to small business lending. So of the 30 billion, 15 billion is allocated to small business lending, which is our pillar 1. Our second pillar, which is home ownership, is roughly about 4.25 billion, and then 10 billion for affordable housing and developers, and then an additional $75 million is allocated to investment in community-led nonprofits and other investment opportunities within the community. So although we look at the 30 billion, those allocations are specific to the 4 different pillars that we've covered in today's presentation. In this slide, it kind of gives you an idea of the formula base that we're using in the presentation to banks and as it relates to their market share according to the FDIC's deposit market share report as of June 30, 2021. So as of June 30, 2021, we have a ranking of the institutions within our community by percentage of market share that those institutions represent within the community. Those those institutions maintain a certain market share in our community. Therefore, there is an expectation that those institutions would contribute towards the 30 billion representative to that market share what they hold. As a result, in the example that you see on your screen, X Bank is ranked 4th in our market at a certain market share, percentage of market, then the anticipation that that institution would therefore maintain that percentage of the $30 billion request from the financial institutions. Now, that aggregate percentage of the 30 billion is then divided over 5 years according to each pillar within the agreement. So pillar 1, 2, 3, and 4, the 15 billion, the 4.25 billion, the 10 billion, and the $75 million, that market share that institution holds within the market would then be responsible for that level of contribution in terms of lending, access to capital, and investment within the Black and brown community. as I stated before, as we move forward in both our negotiations with the institutions, as well as the development of the 1071, in terms of providing us the data to be able to hold these institutions accountable for the level of commitment and intentional investment within the Black and Brown community, is the role of the CRA initiative as we move forward and monitor in partnership with these institutions over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Al. Kathy?
Sure. So earlier this year, there was a lot of buzz around the moves that the Biden administration was making. The president's narrative was one of unity and addressing longstanding disinvestment by making financial investments where there had been lacking in the past. And CRA Baltimore was going to take advantage of this promise, and we were going to take him up on that. Fostering equity is really important to us. So we realized that in order to really gain support from the community at large, we needed to get the word out. And in March, we issued a press release that announced the CRA Baltimore initiative. And following that press release, we immediately hosted a virtual town hall. It was really well attended. And we explained the concept of CRA and bank accountability. And to build a strong coalition necessary to achieve that goal of economic justice, we needed the community. So we also hosted 4 committee meetings for a deeper dive into each pillar. And the tone was always the same: economic justice through greater access to capital for the Black and Latino community. Increasing access to capital to grow and support our Black and Latino small businesses, for Black and Latino wealth creation through increased home ownership, rebuilding our community by supporting Black and Latino focused and led affordable housing developers, and finally, by strengthening intellectual bandwidth by building capacity for Black and Latino led nonprofits. So CRA Baltimore really wants to drive home the point that this is our time and our movement, and to achieve economic justice for Black and Brown communities, we need all hands on deck.
All right. And then we moved into our initiative negotiations. And in order to do the negotiations, we started with the top 5 banks within the region and invited them to come to the table for meetings. And the first meeting with the banks is always a large scale meeting. So it's the banks, their representatives, in the community, meaning the CRA initiative community. And it's a meeting where we actually share with them the blueprint of what we're trying to achieve through CRA Baltimore. We explain to them each pillar. We help them understand the data, just like we did with you all today. And then we actually give them an opportunity as a bank to share with us what are the specific areas that they are already invested in within Baltimore City, and also what's in the immediate pipeline for investment. But the key thing, and Al has really honed this in for us, the key thing is who is at that bank meeting. It is paramount that you have the local CRA representative, the corporate CRA representative, the state bank president, the CRA Baltimore Coalition Leadership, and your CRA Baltimore stakeholders. But you have to have that top tier of bank leadership at this meeting, because if you don't, then there are no decision makers at your table. And you must have the decision makers at your table in order for you to be able to get the negotiations going. And so this is just the very first meeting. Then you go to the negotiation process. And we want this stuff to happen quickly, but it's a dance, right, Al? Aren't we doing a dance with these banks? And so, we had to understand that we had to have a whole set of meetings that are follow-up meetings from the large-scale community meeting. And they have a little bit of a different tone and tenor, because they are with the leadership team, and confidentiality is paramount. NDAs may be required. Why? Because these banks are sharing with us their proprietary data about the Baltimore City market, and they don't want that to get into other banks' hands. And we respect that. And then what we had to recognize is that negotiation is not adversarial. Negotiation is just that, it's negotiation. But we have a formulary and we share that formulary, and we want to get buy-in from them on the formulary. And then we want to talk about, okay, now what are your commitments going to be for Baltimore City? And so we're working through a set of specific commitments even right now. They will be shared with the CRA committee and community, as well as we will host an annual large-scale bank commitment meeting. This is where we get to share with everyone the great commitments that the banks are making to Baltimore City. And then every year there'll be an annual accountability meeting where we actually talk about the progress that has been achieved towards the realization of those commitments to Baltimore City. Did I miss anything, Al?
No, I mean, in short, this is a business transaction that the Black and Latino leaders are holding in the city. Make no mistake about this. This is business. And, you know, with like business, you're constant negotiation. Every year you go back to the negotiation tables. Sometimes you're not going to get everything you want, but it's a compromise. But in short, if you have the will to get this done, it will get done if you really want it. So I applaud the leaders of Baltimore because what I've seen, you're getting incredible movement. And this outside of California, this hasn't been done. This is a first. Baltimore is a first of its kind in the city, in the country, but with no doubt, it's going to be not to be the last. So no, you hit it all, and I applaud the process, Jules.
All right, and the last one, Deborah.
Sure. So we have heard that a lot of time and energy has gone into the CRA Baltimore process and structuring our strategies. So we want to talk about the importance of, the fact that reflection is critical. After we have, worked so diligently, it's important to take time to celebrate small and large successes along the way. And so I want to share with you some of those successes that we are sharing at this time. So as Jules mentioned, we have met with 5 of the top 11 banks in Baltimore. We are currently in bank negotiations with M&T, Truist, and PNC banks about decentralizing and localizing CRA investments. And so that HMDA data that Al Goria talked about, we have been in negotiations about how they break down their data to reflect the racial breakdowns by all 4 pillars. And these banks have been the 3 banks that we've had multiple meetings with to negotiate with 3 of those banks that we mentioned, with M&T, Truist, and PNC. They have been receptive to our ask to ensure that Baltimore City and all Black and Latino communities receive a fair share of CRA investments from the top banks in the region. We hope to have, as Jules indicated, have some good news to share with you in the first quarter of 2022. But we are very proud right now of our most recent success, that we have launched our CRA Baltimore website and landing page, where we focus on seeking equity for Black Latinos in Baltimore, addressing the racial gap, the wealth gap, and the 4 pillars, as we indicated. We're seeking $30 billion investments from the top banks over a 5-year period. Just the website is, or we call it a launch page, but it is outstanding. We articulate the need and understanding the need. So we're asking that you connect with us, on our website and engage and receive our newsletter by completing the contact information on our landing page, so that we can help you stay in the loop as our stakeholders throughout this process.
You know, Jules, if I can add one thing to that, to what Deborah said with regard to, we applaud Truist Bank, we applaud M&T, we applaud PNC, but make no mistake about it, it is our expectation that Bank of America and Wells Fargo will also follow. There will be no top bank will be excluded, and it will be expected for all banks to make a commitment to Black and Latino families, businesses, and communities in Baltimore. That is non-negotiable.
Yes.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Al. And again, it's a process, and all of them have agreed to meet with us. It's just getting all those meetings on the calendar. And this is a commitment. And that's something that we didn't talk about, because each and every one of us have our own jobs, and we're doing this voluntarily, because we understand the importance of making sure that the resources get to the ground and get to Black and Brown communities in Baltimore City. So lastly, we had it open for questions for you all. We are at 12:19. The next session, which we're excited about, is Wells Fargo. And we're going to have a great session with them that is coming right after this at 12:30. But we want to at least be able to field one or two questions from you before we end this session. And we appreciate all of you hanging in there with us, because we've gone a little over. But we just felt that it was important for us to share the totality of what CRA Baltimore is all about. So team, do you all see any specific questions? I know there was a question about the handouts. Go up to the handouts section, and they are there for you, as well as is the agenda for all of the summit sessions. Any other specific questions? Okay. I don't see them in Q&A. I don't see anything in the chat specifically. So we, we want to thank you for being with us this morning/afternoon. And I want to thank the CRA Baltimore team, because I am so proud of each and every one of these individuals. And yes, is the website live? The landing page is live. You just go to crabaltimore.com, crabaltimore.com. And you will be able to sign up for our newsletter, sign up for the mailing list. And then once it becomes live, we will make sure, and it is fully populated, we will make sure that you get a communique inviting you back. And we're hoping that that'll happen within the next few weeks. We'll have the full site up and ready for you. And it's going to be chock full of resources and information, which you can see that is something that we kind of do. We err on the side of more versus less. All right, team. Anything else anyone would like to share before we sign off from the team? Wanda?
No.
Okay, so we are going to ask you to please plan to be with us for our very next session. Again, it is with the Wells Fargo team, and you'll see some of us again there. But we're looking forward to a fantastic dialogue, and then they're going to have small breakouts as well. So with that, we're going to bring this session to a close. And again, we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I need to get out now. Exit.